discovered that my fiancé had been unfaithful. But my folks urged me to forgive him. However, after 30 years, Mom left Dad when I also revealed his affair. In July, I was to get married. When I returned home from a business trip 2 months ago, I discovered my ex-fiancé having sex with my best friend's sister. I evicted him, called off the wedding, threatened to dispose of his belongings if he didn't come retrieve them all, and weeks later I threw everything he gave me on the curb with a free sign: sold, donated, or pawned the ring. I blocked him everywhere. When he arrived, after I had given over his belongings, he knocked on my door and I called the police. When he came up at my place of employment and caused a commotion, I contacted them once more. When his relatives arrived in large numbers to argue his point, I called them on them. I didn't go all out for the sister of my former best friend. I did confess to her husband that I had seen her having an affair with my ex. She was back living with her parents after being evicted from the house, as far as I knew. My ex-best friend attempted to persuade me to give them both an opportunity to clarify, but what? No, then became upset with me for destroying her sister's bond. Called me cold-hearted and petty. Thus, I also kicked her out. I don't want to be around dishonest individuals who don't care about betrayal. Without a doubt, this incident festered inside of me until I let go on my parents. Perhaps that is why I was so hard on them, because it persisted. I had supper with my folks last week. In the hopes that he would avoid talking about my failed engagement, I took him out on a date to the restaurant. I've been under pressure from my parents to reconcile with the ex. He apologizes profusely. I must have a conversation with him. Let him explain himself for 5 minutes. He made a mistake, she meant nothing to him. I'm being harsh by excluding him in this manner. How might I report him to the police? How could I treat his family the same way? His parents. They are decent individuals, and they didn't merit such humiliation. He's struggling right now. He is sad. Everyone is concerned for him. He truly does care about me. His lesson has been learned. It's time to forgive him and mature. They brought it up again despite my date being there. I became agitated. I asked my father if he thought I would tolerate my ex every time he inserted his penis into anything that moved. Just like he does. I questioned my mother about her experience of ignoring her husband's adultery. How does she maintain her composure when dining with ladies who have had sexual relations with her husband for years? Does she want my sister and I to live a life like that, with men like that, for her daughters? My dad was late from work because he was screwing his secretary, so I questioned whether they had any concept how that knowing affected my brothers and me as we grew up. Being aware that a work weekend was a code word for a sexy weekend spent with a woman other than our mother. Did they not understand why I am the only one who continues to communicate with their 4 children? Do they not wonder why they were left off of my brother's wedding invitations? How come they haven't met my brother's wife or kids? Do they believe that my sister's quiet is a result of her tantrums and dramatic behavior? Really? In addition to congratulating them on the death of their only surviving child, I rose up from the table and expressed my wish that their pride, willful ignorance, and suffering would ease their final moments. After that, I departed. My date escorted me to the closest pub, let me cry on his shoulder as I got shit-faced, and then made sure I got home safely. I should have saved him for a normal date instead of F you to my parents. He wrote me a message the next day asking if I was still alive and included a huge Sprite, large fries, and a double cheeseburger with DoorDash. Although I haven't heard from my parents, I didn't block them. I've cooled down enough to feel remorse after a week. Not because of what I said, but because of the expressions on their faces as I said them farewell for the last time. I injure and crush them, especially my mom. I adore my parents in spite of all of their flaws, which are numerous. Knowing that I have harmed them bothers me. It's causing me a great deal of guilt. AITA? Edit 1. I haven't read every remark yet, but based on what I've seen thus far, I believe certain information needs to be clarified. My date was aware that we would be dining with my folks. That morning, he invited me to go out. I casually asked him if he wanted to join me after telling him about my plans for the evening. I was surprised when he said yes. He stated he could post bail if necessary after I told him I wasn't serious, and that it would likely be a bit awkward nonetheless. There you have it. He knew there would be drama as he walked inside the restaurant. Edit 2. I have more folks in my life besides the ones I named in my post. My siblings are a part of my existence. They didn't interrupt me. Only a few days after I found out about the adultery, my sister flew in to be with me. I also have wonderful buddies, friends that assisted me in moving my ex's belongings, assisted me in getting everything to the curb. My buddy helped me find a man who was willing to pay a reasonable amount for the engagement ring. I only brought up ex-boyfriend, ex-girlfriend, etc. because of their actions and words, which helped all those long suppressed emotions to surface when and how they did. remarks to which the op has responded. I have no doubt that my ex's parents, who are on the outside of my parents' social circle, are fully aware of my father's too numerous infidelity scandals. They probably expected me to endure the same kind of contempt my mother has shown me over the years. You love your parents, but you disagree with their choices, commenter. Considering what you've told us about your early years and their current actions, it makes perfect sense. How can they continue to be a non-toxic part of your life? Consider that. What do you want them to accomplish? What would be the very minimum and what would be the ideal? I would prefer it if my mother left my father and took him for granted. That is not going to occur. My father using discretion is another thing that will never occur. For the humiliation they inflicted upon us, what does he care about? I'd be content with a recognition of the hurt we've experienced for the most of our lives, knowing that their needs and wants would always come before anybody else's. But for that, I don't believe I should hold my breath. Given that her mother finds nothing wrong with her spouse straying, and that ops doesn't appear to mind, the commenter may be that. The ex believed there would be no repercussions for him either because of this. Well, I can understand why people may believe that. I never discussed it with anyone outside of my sister. When it came up, we were both intoxicated and euphoric. Others would naturally assume that I embraced the status quo. They would, of course. How could they be supposed to know that I wasn't comfortable with it when no one asked? I recognize that point of view. September 29th, 2024 is the update date. I haven't been here for a minute. Work and life have been hectic, so I haven't had time to update Reddit. We apologize to everyone who keeps contacting us to request an update. I reason that it's better late than never. A brief summary. When my parents pushed me to forgive and make amends with my unfaithful ex, I lost my patience with them. I told them some really hard and painful facts right then and there. I felt a great deal of remorse thereafter. The remorse began to consume me. Where do I begin? I want to start by thanking everyone who left a comment on my post. I made an effort to read every remark, and while I didn't post to get the approval from most of you, it helped ease some of the pressure. Even though my timing was poor, I was able to recognize that what I said was extremely vital, even though it didn't lessen the guilt I had. I also want to thank those of the people who choose to message me privately instead of posting on the public thread. Talking with you has made it clearer to me that my adolescence and childhood were painful, especially after reading your own accounts of a similar background. That, until everything happened, I had never dealt with the scars those years had left. Another shout-out goes out to the people who harassed me about my decisions. Those who propagated the ideas that marriage is sacred and that men are simple beings with simple wants. Those who tried to teach me that I should be a woman who allows a guy to indulge in his vices in order to fulfill my responsibilities, and that I was solely to blame for failing to help my ex when he needed it. I would especially like to thank the guys who promised to teach me how to be obedient and find my place in the world. Finally, my ex should have put a cattle prod on my happy spot, since the cute little chicken nugget that informed me my reaction was evidence that I am a serial cheater. When your wives went, it must have been difficult for you all. Bravo to those women for joining you in fleeing a life of pain. Let's talk about what has transpired since. Shortly after my posting, my mother broke up with my father. Perhaps a few weeks later. One evening, she brought her bags to my flat. She was so pathetic and damaged that I cannot describe it. My heart ached for her as I carried her inside and hugged her. It dawned on me then that she had no one at all, to turn to. No friends, no family. I can't help but wonder if she had been alone during her whole marriage, and whether she would have had the guts to leave my father at that point, if I or one of my siblings had spoken up sooner. My mother is typically very stately and unruffled, so I had never seen her look so shattered. I was astonished to see her like that. I forced her to share my bed since I was so concerned about it. My siblings arrived to provide love and support within days after I phoned them. After that, my sister mother and I slept on my bed. She was glad to see that her kids were still interested. We loved her because we cared. It was the circumstance from which my siblings withdrew. My mother initially stayed with me. She was struggling with it. She benefited from years of shame, remorse, and humiliation. I didn't want to leave her alone since I was concerned about her mental health. I brought her to the shelter and we bought her a dog since I couldn't take time off work to spend every moment with her. I reasoned that if she had something to do, it would divert her attention from her melancholy. She fell in love with a 5-year-old mixed breed, and he fell in love with her as well. I had hoped for a puppy since they are lively and would keep her occupied. He is a fool. We're not sure how it happened, but one night we woke up to his crying because he had managed to get his head stuck between the stair spindles. His entire head. To save him, we had to summon the fire department. My mother, who now calls him her baby, obviously didn't believe he was at blame. But he loves my mother. Ren transported her across the nation to live with him and his family when my older brother shifted some things about. He believed that if she had no opportunity of encountering her father or any of his other wives, she would do better. It appears that the therapist he found for her is helping. According to all sources, she is an indulgent grandma who loves her role. She sees them every day, because she has a separate in-law suite. According to my brother, the children can now be located at grandma's when they go missing. My father is my father. He has plenty of company. Shortly after my mother moved across the nation, he took me out to dinner and introduced me to the new woman in his life. Since she had referred to my mother as her closest friend throughout my childhood, I informed them both that I knew precisely who she was. Another uncomfortable meal is about to happen. Despite my dad's best efforts to keep things amicable, every time she spoke to me, I would recall an instance from my early years when she was with our family and inquire as to whether she was having an affair with my father at the time. He contacted me the following day to express his disappointment in me. It only seemed right that I disclose my own disappointments. We had a lengthy argument. He attempted to minimize what he had done over the years and to portray himself as the victim of his own deeds. I ended up barring him and ending the chat abruptly. He arrived at my door a little more than a month ago. He must have been a little alarmed when I refused to let him in. I don't want to lose me too, he informed me. Whatever you think of him, he is my father. I adore him. I also don't want to lose him. He assured me that he would not compel me to speak to any of his women. We have enjoyed a few enjoyable adventures as far, and everything has gone smoothly. I have a cautious optimism that we will be able to stay in one another's lives. As for myself, I'm in treatment and followed the advice several of you provided me. Realizing that, despite your belief that you are doing well, you are not is a humble experience. Digging through all of that past has been incredibly difficult and nearly intolerable. After certain sessions, my only goal is to go to the closest pub and drink until I lose all memory of what I just went through in order to determine how it all began and why I am the person I am. One of the hardest things I have ever done, in my opinion, is therapy. The length of time some of you have been doing it is beyond me. I'm not sure why you do it so voluntarily either. For listening to all of you nutters in the first place, I'm a mad nuts. However, it is beneficial. The majority of you are looking for an update. I can't even begin to count the number of messages I still get from individuals who are curious about him. You all seem to be saying, "Girl, just tell us about the date. We don't care about whatever life crisis you're going through." Well, because my piece wasn't about him. I haven't responded to any of those questions. You all contributed to our current situation, therefore I feel like I owe you something in a roundabout manner. I'll offer you a few things, but I won't go into detail about everything that has transpired between us. He saw a podcast on YouTube and got in touch with me. With the question, "Is this you?" he emailed me a link. To say I was ashamed would be an understatement. I was too embarrassed to respond to him. I didn't even care to read the texts he sent me over the following few weeks, because I was so overcome with humiliation. There were a ton of screenshots of people's remarks when I eventually got around to reading them. You don't need me to tell you what was in the remarks he was sending me, therefore I'm taking a risk. After a while, I responded to him. Making time to see each other was challenging. My life has been hectic, both personally and professionally, as I mentioned before. He has a life and a job, too. Only a few times were we able to get together for coffee. I didn't believe that we could develop a friendship, much less anything more. Since then, I've discovered that he is relentless and tenacious. Similar like a dog that has a bone. He persisted until we managed to schedule a second date. It was a successful date that led to another. Then another. He then gave me an introduction to the two most significant individuals in his life. His parents. Since then, I've accumulated a collection of wooden birds that his grandpa carved. I am too thin, according to his grandma. Every time I meet her, she feeds me, and she generally brings food home with me. He's friendly with my brothers and sister. He met them all when he accompanied me to my mother's birthday celebration. He treated her with great grace. He was stored as cheeseburger in my phone. He bought me a double cheeseburger, so he took offense at that. I then began referring to him as double cheese, which I later abbreviated to DC. My phone still has him stored as cheeseburger. I'm not sure how to handle the fact that he's an undercover Swiftie. I don't hate Taylor Swift, but I didn't choose him to be her lover. He did use his nieces and younger sister as a front for his love for Taylor Swift. He utilizes me now. Being thus utilized is okay to me. Remarks to which OP has responded. I wish you the best and ask for a duck to accompany those birds, commenter. This is an update. I hope you have a happy life. He sent me a goose instead of the owl I requested, haha. I'm thrilled to learn that you're seeing the cheeseburger, commenter. I hope that continues to go smoothly. I was hoping for some news on the cheating ex. Like he lost his job and is homeless. Funny. He's not even on my radar, oop. Why are you still in contact with your father and why do you still adore him? I adore my father. You may love someone and still detest what they do. Similar to how I still adore my mother despite her staying. I won't feel bad about loving both of my parents. It will never occur. Where do I avoid the question farther down the thread? I adore my father. I adore my mom. He subjected us to a great deal of abuse, and she also subjected us to cruelty by making us remain. In any case, I adore them. I will not dispute it. I adore my folks. I'm being sued. Next narrative. They're now saying that if I don't end things with him, they'll fire me. It matters because my partner, who is 25M, is not a model, and I, who am 24F, teach science in high school. He assisted me in carrying in some supplies for a lab I'll be performing with my children today after school. The principal, I'll call her Jan, was outside for dismissal when he got there and was able to greet him. Jan asked him if they had ever met because he seemed familiar when he was assisting me with setting up my classroom. That was my boyfriend's statement that he didn't think so. I gave him a tour around the school once we were done, ending at the office. Jan was still there and greeted us once more before her face took on an expression that I can only describe as terror. She abruptly excused herself, leaving us bewildered and alone. My boyfriend inquired if she would have recognized him from his appearance. Given that she is a middle-aged woman who hardly understands how to operate her phone, I responded without a doubt nope. Until I received a text from her as we were preparing supper, he allowed me to continue living in denial. Good evening, AP. I would like to meet with you and the HR person tomorrow morning, she stated. Kindly arrive at my office by 7 a.m. Now that she knows him from his page, I'm very sure my boyfriend was right. I can see by the look in his eyes that he's at least a little pleased of himself. Even though he continues trying to tell me it's not about that. I don't know who else to turn to. Because my family doesn't know he's an up model, my friends are busy. And I've booted him out to go get me some stress-relieving goodies. Do any of you have any advice for me? I want to get out of here. Baby dingo thatter. That would be an absurd justification for termination. If you are in a one-party consent state, I would advise recording. She's a mischievous girl, therefore she can't fire you. Whoa. One of my coworkers informed me at the start of the year that another teacher had been fired for wearing a skirt that was too long, so I think I was simply terrified. Hilda, Solomon's Marbles. Say your union, please. Don't acknowledge or consent to anything, call your representative. Actually, say as little as you can. You're going to get compensated if it's regarding his page. Here's the opposite, though. You mentioned that he assisted you in carrying items in, which are meant to be signed in by guests. Did he? Oop. Yes, I had him sign in at the front desk after requesting her consent a day beforehand. They updated his sticker badge. September 12, 2024. Hi there. You guys provided me a ton of advice when I asked for it. Thank you. I had a lot of support. Many of you clocked it as well. I do have a job at a private religious school. In any case, I came for my meeting at 7 o'clock. I know many of you thought it was early, but for me that was a typical time because school starts at 7:45. Despite being in a one-party consent state, I requested to be safe and did record the meeting. My principal, Jan, opened the meeting by stating that they had lately learnt about my boyfriend's involvement in obscene activities. Since my boyfriend had never, as far as I knew, been charged with anything similar, I questioned what she meant. At that point, Pam, the HR person, stated that someone had discovered his account. They were unable to identify the individual but simply stated that it was a staff member. I had never heard of it, so I questioned what it was, as many of you mentioned. They did not appear as uncomfortable as I had anticipated, but they did explain. After that, they inquired as to whether I had ever taken part in or planned to take part in one of his videos. No, I said. I brought up the email exchange I had with Jan requesting authorization to bring no unvetted visitors into the facility, and I reminded her that he had his ID scanned to obtain a temporary badge. Pam stated that he would no longer be permitted to attend the school because of the nature of his internet behavior. I said, okay, and inquired as to whether I would also have to reveal my dad's internet usage if I ever brought him in to assist with anything. Although it wasn't required, Pam stated that they couldn't have any staff members or teachers connected to a sex worker. She told me that I was not allowed to bring him onto school property, to school events, or to anything associated with the school when I inquired what that meant. In addition, the church was represented by the school. Only those who maintained a decent image were allowed to be in relationships with the workers. My boyfriend doesn't do that, apparently. She said that they would be fired right away if they received even one report from a parent, student, or employee of my involvement with him following this discussion. Since the staff person who initially reported it proceeded into a corn site, I inquired as to whether that also applied to them. That was unimportant. According to Jan, who stated that the discussion was about me and not the other employee. Soon after, the meeting came to a close. I was asked to sign a document acknowledging the encounter. I carried it home with me after telling them I wanted to review it first. In addition to being angry, my boyfriend keeps claiming that he is to blame, even though it isn't his fault. The demands placed on educators are absurd. In the hopes that I can leave them as soon as possible, we're going to have a little Indeed/connected in date. However, the lesson learnt is to never accept a position at a religious school.